This is Allie from the Terra team to walk you through the T101 Workflows Quickstart. This tutorial workspace will give you hands-on practice setting up and launching workflows on data in a table. This is the second in a series of 3 Quickstart tutorials that walk through a mock study of the correlation between height and grade point average for a cohort of 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. This tutorial has 3 parts. You'll first run a pre-configured workflow to calculate the average GPA for each individual student. Then you'll set up and run the same workflow, but from a blank configuration card for a subset of those students. And finally, you have the option of running a follow-up workflow that uses the GPAs from the first workflows to calculate an average class GPA. Let's get started. It's always a good idea to read over the workspace dashboard. This dashboard has step-by-step instructions to follow. The data page includes the student data table from the Data Tables Quickstart. Tidy it up a little. We have 86 students. Here's the first name, their height, and GPAs for 3 subjects: language arts, math, and science. There's also a student set table, which you made in the Data Tables Quickstart. It's a subset of the student data with the first 8 students. Okay, let's start to run those workflows. In part 1, you're going to run the first workflow, calculate student GPA. So you can start by clicking on the card. This will take you to the configuration form, which gives you some information about the workflow, the version, where it's hosted. We're going to run the workflow with inputs defined by the data table, and we're using data from the student table. So the first thing to do is to select the data. And you can go ahead and select all the students by clicking the box at the top. You notice that it's going to be saved as a new student set, and we can just call this all students. Click OK down here at the bottom. This workflow is fully configured, so all you have to do is click Run Analysis. You'll get the confirmed launch form telling you that it's going to launch 86 analyses in parallel. If you want, you can write a note about your submission, or you can just click Launch. That's it. You've run your first workflow. Congratulations. You can monitor how your submissions are going in the job history page. See right now, all the jobs are queued. You can refresh the page. When the jobs are complete, you'll see green check marks in the status column right here. You can now go back to the data page and click on the table to see how it's been updated. You notice there's a brand new column here, the cumulative GPA. This is the average of the language, math, and science GPAs. It's what the workflow was calculating. In the second exercise, you'll run the same workflow, but this time you're going to do the setup. You'll learn to set up the workflow from scratch by adding the input attributes or variables and configuring the workflow to write outputs back to the data table. Okay, let's go. Click on the workflow we're going to run. Again, the root entity type is the student table, so that's great. Select data, and this time let's choose the subset of 8 students that you made in the Data Tables Quickstart. Click OK. The first thing is to go to the Inputs tab. All these variables need to be filled in. Start by clicking into the first attribute, and you'll get a drop-down of all the columns in the input table. We know the variable we're looking for is the language score, so we'll go down to GPA Language Arts. For math, same thing. This GPA Math, and also for the science score. The third variable, num scores, is a variable that's used across all the inputs. In this case, it's the total number of courses the workflow averages over, and it's the same no matter what student you're analyzing. These workspace level variables have a special table, the workspace data table, in the other data section of the data page. The way you tell Terra to access it is by typing in workspace, and then you can select number of courses is the variable. We'll save that. Terra writes outputs to workspace storage by default. The last step is to set up the workflow to write outputs to the input table in the form. If you go to the Outputs tab, there's one output variable, the average GPA. You type this dot again, which tells Terra it's a column in the input data table. And this time, call it something different than cumulative GPA. Let's call it total GPA. This way you'll be able to compare. Click the button to finalize, and now you're ready to run. Click the Run Analysis button, confirm launch. This time it's launching 8 analyses, one for each student in your subset. Click Launch. There you go. When your workflow is complete, there are some thought questions in the Quickstart guide that you can answer. You'll see the green check in the status box. You can go back to the Data tab, clicking on the student table, and if you scroll over, you'll see there's a new column, Total GPA, that is only filled in for those first 8 students. If you go into the settings and put this total GPA next to the cumulative GPA, just to make it easy to compare, you'll see it is the same number. No surprise. Last exercise, you're going to use each student's cumulative GPA, the outputs from the last exercise, to calculate the 7th grade class average. The first thing you'll need to do is create a set of the 7th graders to run on. So if we go to the student table and order the table by grade by clicking on the arrow, you can select only 7th graders. There are 29 of them. If you go to the Edit Data button, save selection as set, and we'll save it as 7th grade. Now under your student set, there are 3 different sets. There's the student subset that you created in the Data Tables Quickstart, all the students that you created when you ran the workflow on all students, and the 7th graders. In this case, the workflow, which is the same basic workflow, is going to take in the cumulative GPA of each of the 7th graders and average across the number of 7th graders in the class. There's going to be 29 input values, 1 GPA for each student, and 1 output. The workflow takes in an array, the GPAs of all 29 students, and it outputs a single average. The workspace form is filled out, but I want you to take a look at it. Step 1, we're going to select the root entity type. It is taking the student set, not data from each student individually. So that's the correct entity type. We're going to select the data. In this case, it's the 7th graders. The attribute is this.students.cumulative GPA. Each part of this string gives Terra instructions on where to find the data. The first part, this, says look in the root entity table. The next part, students, says find the students column so we can get the student IDs. Then using those student IDs, the cumulative GPA part says go to the student table and find the cumulative GPAs for those select students. Notice that the dropdown only offers columns from the root entity table. If your tables are nested, as in this case, you'll need to type in the full attribute string correctly. The next step is to launch the analysis by clicking the button. Note that even though you're using data from all 29 students in the 7th grade, Terra runs a single workflow with a single output value. You'll see that here. This will launch one analysis. The single output will be written to your student set table, your root entity, when the workflow is complete. If you click launch, there we go. Congratulations, you've now launched back-to-back workflows in Terra. The nice thing about Terra is this is something that can be automated. When the workflow is complete, you'll get the green succeeded bar here in the status column. And if you go back to the data tab and look in the student set table, you see that right next to 7th graders is the average class GPA. Thanks for joining me. Hope you enjoyed the Quick Start. Next up, the Notebooks Quick Start, where you will learn if there truly is a relationship between a student's height and their GPA.